well to check that as we had to move one wheel in relation to the others, that the nuts are tight. In fact, they weren't. It's not a mistake that I'm known for, but this is what I did check. Down and they're secure. Next I'm going to check the single and the double locking key. Now, there have been times when I've been setting up chiming clocks where if I've set it up according to the needs of the single locking key, I've got to readjust it to take account of the double. Conversely, when I set it up to take account of the needs of double locking key, I've had to readjust it to the needs of the single. But on balance, I think you're probably likely to find it best if you do set it up according to the needs of the double locking detent, but then check it according to the needs of the single. Next, we're going to set up the double locking detent, but when you're setting it up, normally one would hold the escape wheel stationary so that we can leave the lifting piece and the cannon pinion in the exact position we want. This clock, being a floating balance, means that there's an increased chance of the centre floating around. So to set that up, I first of all want to lock the time. So we'll start by replacing this wheel, which takes the drive from the centre wheel. Then replace this wheel. The escape wheel. And the pallets. And then replace the train wheel bridge. Two screws holding the bridge. That's just a little friction pad to take the bounce out of the pallets when they bang. So now I haven't got the frustration of this bouncing around when I don't want it to. It's held securely now. So with a clock which has a pendulum, I would naturally put my finger on the escape wheel while I do the setting up. So what I'm looking for now is that both detents should lock And when I operate the high lifter, which is this one with a little red ink painted on it for easy identification, that at the peak of the cam there should be minimal clearance between the detent, the both locking detent and the pin detent. Now, although I said minimal, to quantify that, this is what I'm looking for. Here is the detent. There is the pin. The gap here should be approximately 5/100 of a millimetre. That is what I would consider to be safe. So now there is power on the train. We turn the cannon pinion. The train is now unlocked. We've had our quarter wheel warning. The pin is almost ready to fall off of the cam. And now I check in here the gap between the double locking detent and the locking wheel. Now, as the locking wheel has advanced very slightly, I'll turn it back so that the pin is immediately underneath the hook. So in practice, I would turn the fly or the locking wheel or the warning wheel, doesn't matter which, so the pin is immediately underneath the double locking detent, and then check the gap. Now for that, ideally, you want to look along a parallel line between the double locking detent and the pin. Now the gap that I've got there is very nearly an eighth of an inch, which is much too generous. As the screw in the single locking detent has only been tacked down, you can push the single locking detent down, which will allow the double locking detent to drop and close that very substantial gap that we have. We now have a very small but safe gap between the double locking detent and the pin. At this stage, I would tack the screw in the arbor of the strike flirt, take it down just a little bit tighter, but still not tighten. Now we will check before we do the necessary adjustments. I think it's important that we should know how a detent locks and what we mean by safe clearance. The pin in the locking wheel is round. The locking detent should have a vertical face and a fairly sharp point. But of course you could imagine that in the process of unlocking, for the last part of the unlocking anyway, that the rounded part of the pin here will actually lift the detent once it is lifted so far by the cannon pinion or whatever it lifted, yes, the lifting piece. Once it is lifted so far, the rounded part of the pin will push the hook up out of the way. So the rules are this. When we talk of the locking, we want to make sure that the centre line of the pin is above the point on the detent, but also when unlocking occurs, we want to see a safe gap between the pin and the locking detent. We mustn't be dependent upon the curvature of the pin for unlocking to occur. In better quality work, we're likely to find that the pin here will be D-shaped rather than round, so that the locking lever has to lift clear positively before unlocking would occur. Right, so what I'm going to do now is turn the cannon pinion so that unlocking occurs, but arresting the fly with the pin in the locking wheel immediately underneath the locking detent, and then check the gap. Now the gap although I adjusted it leaving a small gap just now, in fact the position has changed, possibly as a result of giving that screw in the single locking detent a slight further turn. And so I now hold the strike flirt down while I lift the single locking detent to create a gap. And test it again. I now have a gap. The gap is generous. It's at least twice what I want, so I will lower the single locking detent yet again. That's better. I'll now try it again. Well, I've got a gap there. It's probably marginally less than 5/100ths gap, but it's a gap and it's safe. Before I alter that again, I'll now check it on the low lifters. So what I'm doing now is turning the locking wheel backwards again slightly to save going one complete revolution of the wheel. And well, I could lift the single locking detent out of the way, or alternatively I could put the Chime locking plate on at this stage. I think I'll choose to do that. So the Chime train is locked with both locking detents. So I would put the Chime locking plate back on now, so that this pin is located into that position. In other words, we know that the chime corrector should operate at the end of striking 1/4 the hour. So with both hooks engaged, I put the locking plate on at the end of striking 1/4. It may involve lifting the double locking detent slightly to get the locking plate on. Should you ever forget which of these pins should locate, or rather which gap should be located, remember it's the one with the chime corrector anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But if your chime corrector is inside the clock, then of course you have to bring the chime corrector around to operate. So we put the chime corrector and locking plate on.
Yeah. I thought it was what Tom was looking for from the files.
Now, if I put it on where I was going to, I wouldn't have access to the screw to tighten it. So in fact, I'm going to put it on having finished striking 1/4 past, purely to give me access to the screws. and then tack down the screw on the chime locking plate. In fact, I want to go on a little further, but the chime corrector is butting the double locking detent at the moment, so I'm lifting the double locking detent up, and now my wheel will go on a little further, the locking plate that is will go on a little further. The locking plate should stand clear of the main plate. So remember, it's not just orientation around this way, it's how far you put it on that way as well. As long as it doesn't foul the front of the fork, or foul any other part of the fork, or touch the plate, then it will function satisfactorily. I've tightened the screw down, and you will find that most locking plates will have an angle there, a flat there, a vertical face there, and then the top of the camera on there. So we want the pin to have dropped and the train run on slightly. So put it on so that there's a gap between this vertical face here and the back face of your pin. The locking plate here turns in that direction. That is okay. Now we haven't lost sight of our objective. Our objective is to check the single and the double locking detent. So now, either by lifting the lifting piece or lifting the strike flirt, bring the locking plate around so that the chime corrector will operate. Okay. Now we should have both locking detents locked, and they are. Both locking detents are locked. I doubt that the camera will pick it up, but that's the way it is. Now, with the chime corrector operating, we should find that the three low lifters fail to unlock the train on both detents. It may unlock the single locking detent, in fact almost certainly will. It depends whether the vertical faces on the double locking detents are dead in line with one another or very slightly stepped. Anyway, in this instance, the single locking detent is lifting, leaving the double locking detent firmly locked. Now, the high lifter. So, I'm checking that the high lifter, when it operates, will leave this 500th gap between the detent and the pin, and it does. So I allow the chime to operate now. So if the hammers were on, the chime would now be chiming the hour. The hour is now complete. The chime train has relocked. Now I want to make sure that the locking on the single locking detent is safe, but also that when I unlock, that there is a safe gap between the single locking detent and the locking pin. The locking is safe. And the unlocking is safe. So we have now a very happy compromise for both. This is the position that we have reached. For that, we will choose a fresh piece of paper. The position we have reached is that when the single locking detent is locking, the pin in the locking wheel is there, the detent is there, and there's a healthy engagement. Then, when we unlock on the low lifters with the single locking detent, we have a safe gap between the pin in the locking wheel and the detent. Then when we operate the double locking detent, or that is when we bring the chime corrector into play, we find that the double locking detent fails to unlock, so the train remains firmly locked, but when the high lifter operates, once again we have a safe clearance between the detent and the pin. So it is safe on both single and double locking detents. We can now lock the wheel. We can now lock the double locking detent. But check that the detent hasn't moved on the arbor in the process of locking the screw down. So the test that we've just done, do again. The tests are quite simple. At the moment, we are about to chime 1/4 the hour. So we should find that the single detent is unlocked with the low lifters with a safe gap. One operated. Now, rather than let the train go on, hold the train still and you can try 3 in quick succession. So, number 2 tried, number 3 tried, and they're all safe. Now you can turn the train backwards slightly to save going a whole revolution. No, the chime locking plate is on, so you do have to go a whole revolution. So we'll unlock the train now. Let the chime locking plate turn until 1/4 the hour has chimed and the train relocked. Now the 3 low lifters should leave the double locking detent safely locking the train, which is what is happening, and the high lifter should lift the double locking detent about 0.05 of a millimetre clear of the locking pin. It does. Now that is the most complicated bit there is to know about chimes, if you can do that. I think now would be a good time to put the other 2 barrels in. We're putting the time barrel in now because once the hammers go in, the hammers will prevent us from putting the time barrel in. We'll also put the strike barrel in. So remove the bush there first, because we didn't take it out earlier. Identify the time barrel. Put the bush on the front and insert the time barrel into the plate. These bushes normally drop in very easily. This one is tight. And we'll replace the ratchet wheel. That one has more striking marks on it than does time, so we'll assume that's the strike. So replace the time ratchet wheel, engage the bridge, and for the strike barrel. I would normally lubricate the barrel first. Put on the strike ratchet wheel. And the ratchet wheel bridge. I like to centre the bridge so that the barrel arbor doesn't scrape on the side of it. And then put a little power on the strike train. Now the striking train, the arbor of the striking train that is, doesn't normally have a spring behind it because of the weight of the 1 or 2 or 3 hammers that it will actually lift. So to set up the gathering pallet, you simulate the weight of the hammers by just putting a torque or a slight turning force on the barrel arbor. Now remember the rules for setting up the strike. When the hammer falls off of the arbor, the warning wheel should turn on by a minimum of a quarter of a turn, plus whatever extra it needs to come to rest opposite the warning beacon, which in this case is your strike flirt. The end of the strike flirt here is the warning beacon. So here we are simulating the power of a spring. I triggered the chime inadvertently, so we'll wait for that to finish. It's finished. So now simulate the weight of a spring on the arbor. That's the moment when I'll do it again before. Control the fly to within half a turn of the fly. That's the moment when the arbor drops off of the lifter. Observe where the pin in the warning wheel is. It's 45 degrees from its lock position. So therefore allow it the quarter turn that it would normally have, which brings it beside the locking detent. Then a further half a turn so that it is opposite the locking detent. Then put the gathering pallet on in such a way that it would cause the strike to lock. Now that would include not only putting the gathering pallet on, but also the rack hook. So there's the gathering pallet put on in approximately the right position. Now we place the rack hook and then position the gathering pallet so that the rack hook drops down into the gap. Like so. And push it on firmly. With this particular clock, our gathering part has a vertical face there, a rounded face over here, so that the rack hook will drop into this gap this turns in this direction, so that the lever should have dropped in and the train run on slightly. So put it about centre, but a little nearer this side of centre. Now all one has to do is to drive the gathering pallet on. For that we'll want 2 punches, a support punch and a cannon pinion punch, and also a clock hammer. Pop your support punch into a suitable state, and there's the cannon pinion punch, or the punch for driving on gathering carts. Now support around the back pivot on the gathering pallet wheel. And then position the punch. Double check that you are resting around that pivot. And then tap your gathering pallet on. I've only put this one on semi-tight because it's a demonstration clock, and by driving them on, the hole stretches. But on a customer's clock that doesn't get repaired as frequently as this one does, then make sure that the gathering pallet is driven on securely. Now I think we can put the rack on. And the minute wheel, well in fact we'll put the minute wheel on first. Put the hour wheel on. Put the rack on. Now to set the rack and the count wheel up correctly, or rather the hour snail, I should say, you want to turn the hands. I'll use the brass line pliers for that. But turn the hands until the high lifter operates. That is allowing lifting and falling off to occur. Now it doesn't matter whether the chime has gone out of sequence at this stage, but the high lifter has now operated, which means that the rack hook would have allowed the rack to drop, and the rack should drop into the centre of a square. To make sure that it is in the centre of the square, I disengage the minute wheel from the cannon pinion, and then leaving the hour wheel and the minute wheel engaged, I can turn the now put on your large washer to stop the hour wheel lifting and disassociating. Put the clip on and close the clip down. Check the end shake in the minute wheel, and also check that the hour wheel cannot lift sufficiently high for the wheel to disengage from the minute wheel pinion. That's okay, but I'll just close that down a little bit further. Right. Now we place the clip also for the rack hook. And check the end shapes in the rack hook, which is okay. So that's the striking mechanism finished. Now we can turn the clock over and concentrate on setting up put the small ratio wheel on the back. Put the chime barrel into position, and then the back plate. That screw for the moment is just tacked down lightly because this might have to change slightly the angle of it. May have to change very slightly. Just making sure that the pivot is in its hole properly. And now replace the hammer assembly. Turn the clock over and replace the screws on the front. And then tighten down the screws. Including the first screw that was put on. Pop back the other ratio wheel, the other small ratio wheel, and then the ratio wheel proper, and just very lightly tack down one of the two screws. To be mechanically sound, there should only be one screw, but in fact there are two. And now we'll put on the lever which operates the strike hammers. Normally with a strike hammer there's only one hammer. In a chime, very often the lifter that operates the hammer in fact operates a number of hammers, usually, or at least often, 3. So next we want to adjust the angle of the arbor and the lever that does the lifting. Still the same principles are involved here. In other words, from falling off of one lifter, not so much picking up the next lifter, but rather the hammer's lifting should still equal about 2.5 turns on the morning wheel. But another way of setting them up, and often a very convenient way, is to observe the height of the lift of the hammers when the chime is operating. Usually it means that the hammers lift by just a little more than the height of the hammer. So when the strike operates, if you get a similar lift, then you're likely to find that it will all fall into place anyway. So for the moment, we just tack down the hammer arbor and the lifter to where we think it would be about right, leaving end shape in the arbor. The end shape's right. Now check the angle. The angle seems rather generous. just get an early idea, an early impression. Just secure the wrap. Right, now, to get an early impression whether the lift is sufficient, just operate the striking mechanism and observe the amount of lift. The lift could be just a little bit more. The lift is about equal to the height of the hammer, and it could be just a little bit more, quite safely. That's better. And then lock the screw down. And of course check. That's right. And the gap that I can see now between the arbor and the next lifter would be equal to about 2.5 turns on the warning wheel. So now we can disregard the strike completely and go on setting up the chime. The other small ratio wheel has fallen off because it wasn't secured, so we'll secure that in a minute. Remember to check any click in the wheel after securing it. This one, the C-clip wants opening up a little bit more. Right, now we come to the final part of setting up a chime, and this is where we make sure that the hammer sequence on the chime barrel in here agrees with the chime locking plate. To do that successfully, look at the hammers in the case. Quarter past is always the highest note, which is the shortest rod, followed in succession by longer and longer rods. So quarter past is, I'll start that again, quarter past is so that was a sequence of hammers, 1, 2, 3, 4, starting from the front of the top. So quarter past will give us a sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4. Let us set that up. We start off looking at the chime locking plate. Operate the chime until quarter past has been chimed. We are now on the hour. Here's the high cam, which will operate the strike. Allow the chime to finish and the wrap to gather up. again operate the chime, which could be done on the lifting piece, or on the strike clerk. For the moment, nothing much is happening, which I think is because there's insufficient power on the train, so we put a little more power on. And here now, the locking plate is showing that we have finished striking quarter past. So now we have to have the hammers agreeing with that. So we turn the clock over, and then we will adjust the ratio wheel so that we've had a sequence of 4 hammers starting from the hammer. Now to get the hammers agreeing with the chime locking plate, you just move the ratio wheel. We have already tacked it down. I'll just confirm that. So now turn the ratio wheel until we get a sequence of 1, 2, 3, 4 hammers. But of course, immediately the last hammer falls, the train doesn't just cut out. Instead, what will happen is that the last hammer will fall, and then there will be a short run on of the train, and then locking will occur. So we will now turn the ratio wheel in the direction in which it turns when it drives, and observe the hammers falling, and then give it a... Looking from the back of the clock, the ratio wheel turns anti-clockwise, and we're looking for the hammer closest to the dial, followed by the other hammers in order. Wrong order. One, 2, 3. So now we have the 4th hammer arriving. So when the 4th hammer drops, there will be a very slight further run on of the wheel, and then the train should lock. So now I'll just tack down that screw on the ratio wheel just a little bit more. So the ratio wheel can still be turned, yet will drive. And now check. And I no longer have to worry about the sequence of hammers because I brought them right anyway, and I'm not going to be out by as much as one hammer, let alone a sequence. It's just part of the hammer might be out. So all I've got to do now is trigger the chime, and I'm expecting a sequence of 8 hammers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now here's the 8th hammer. So what I do is control the fly until the last hammer falls. And in fact, the last hammer isn't quite falling, and the train is locked. So clearly, the ratio wheel should have turned a little further. So turn it a little further. Now turn it until the hammer near the last hammer falls, and a little bit more. Now there's the last hammer falling. and I was looking closely at the plate just to align a tooth with a mark on the plate somewhere, so that I could see by how much about I was turning the wheel. So now check it again on the next quarter. Now this is quarter 2, so we're looking for a sequence of 12 hammers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now control the fly. I'm doing that with the middle finger of the right hand. Again, the hammer hasn't quite fallen, so the ratio wheel wants turning on a little bit more still. So turn it on until the last hammer falls, plus a little bit. Now when we say plus a little bit, just to give you a rough idea, I would suggest about the equivalent of a quarter of a tooth. Now try it again. So trigger the chime. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now after the 15th hammer, just hold that up, because the strike will now take over as you're on the last quarter. Let the strike finish operating, and you can speed that up by lifting the rack by hand. And then observe the last hammer. Well, while I was doing that, I've let it slip anyway. So it doesn't matter. Come around to the next quarter. So trigger the chime, and we have back to our original sequence now. 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th hammer. So control the fly until the hammer falls. It's fallen. Now observe where the pin in the warning wheel is. The pin in the warning wheel was very close to the lock position, and probably there was only about an 1/8 of a turn of the warning wheel to locking after the last hammer fell. So again, we want to turn the ratio wheel on just a little bit. So turn the clock around and find a little mark on the plate that would act as the datum line. Turn the ratio on by a gnat's whisker, and then check it on the next quarter, which is half past. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now this is the 8th hammer. Control the fly in the usual way. The hammer's fallen. Now observe where the pin in the warning wheel is in relation to its lock position. And it's a little over a quarter of a turn away from the lock position. I've let the train run on to lock. That is now correctly set up, so that when the last hammer has fallen, we have a little over a quarter of a turn run on to locking. So now I can lock the screw on the ratio wheel securely. And in the process of checking that nothing has moved, I will also check now all 4 quarters. If the clock was designed and made properly, you should find no difference on any quarter. But in practice, there will be a slight difference on the different quarters. Now, we want ideally a minimum of a quarter of a turn of the warning wheel from the last hammer falls. But it could be up to half a wheel. And it's likely that your clock will accommodate those 2 criteria on all 4 quarters. So now go around all 4 quarters and check. So I just checked the first quarter. Well, in fact, when I say the first quarter, I mean I have checked 1 quarter. The quarter I checked was in fact the 2nd quarter. So I'm going to write down 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. The 2nd quarter, I've got a quarter of a turn plus. which is quite safe. So now I check the next quarter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now control the fly. Still lifting. The last hammer's fallen. Now check where the pin in the warning wheel is. And once again, it's at very nearly the top of the clock, which means that we have about a quarter wheel run on. So the third quarter gave us a quarter of a turn run on. Now we'll check the fourth quarter. So in a similar way, trigger the chime. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. This is the 16th hammer, which is now fallen, and we have half a wheel run on when the last hammer falls. So we can see there is a difference between at least two of the quarters there, but both of the extremes are within the criteria that we said we were looking for. Only one more quarter left to try, the first quarter. Quarter past. 1, 2, 3, this is the fourth hammer. Now fallen, the pin in the warning wheel again is opposite the warning detent, which means there's just a half of a wheel run on. Now, being a Westminster chime and only 4 hammers, I'm quite happy with all of that. But had this been a Whittington or a St Michael, and you've got 8 hammers to get into the same space, if you like, then I would have been prepared to have cut the rather generous quarter of a turn run on, cut that down a little bit, leaving more time for the hammers to pick up speed, or rather the train to pick up speed, before the hammers have to be lifted when the train is originally triggered. So that clock, this clock, has now been set up correctly and checked. Other clocks you will find very similar to this, but the difference may be, for example, that the ratio wheel is on the arbor rather than mounted on the locking plate. So we found this one. Probably instead of having 2 hooks as a double locking detent, there may be a flat bar and 1 hook. There are, as I've already said, there are 2 or 3 slightly different patents. But if you've understood the principles involved on this one, then you should understand any master-leaf chime that goes through your hands. I would strongly recommend that you study the clock before you strip it, because you're going to be the person that's going to have to put it back together. And I think good advice with any complicated mechanism is this: don't strip it until you can explain the function of every part and every lever on the clock. When you feel you can do that, then you're in a strong position to strip it and be able to reassemble it again. If necessary, making sketches